Dear friends, you're watching the Battlefield Map Review, and I'm glad to greet each and every one of you on the channel. Before we get into the situation on the ground, the usual request. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it right now and make sure to hit the bell notification. This isn't just a formality. YouTube systematically restricts the reach of this type of content. Military analytical material gets shadow banned, and without your support, new episodes simply don't reach the audience. Every like, every comment, every bell notification is real, tangible help that keeps this channel on air. A special thank you to everyone who has already supported us through Super Thanks. You know what it means to hold the line. Now, let's get to work. Today is a busy day with plenty of events, so let's go through everything in order. Zelensky's ceasefire. More questions than answers. Let's start with the political context, without which the picture on the front will be incomplete. May 6 is the date that Zelensky publicly announced as the start of a ceasefire. In theory, hostilities should have been suspended from today, at least on the Ukrainian side. In practice, things look quite different. The fundamental problem is that the Russian side has not officially confirmed its participation in this ceasefire. No public statement, no official announcement from the Ministry of Defense or the Kremlin that Russia would join a cessation of hostilities. None of that has come. This means that for now, the ceasefire exists more in the declarative space than on the ground. The front continues operating in its usual mode. Fighting yesterday did not stop on a single direction. We'll be watching how the situation develops. Zaporizhzhia. Direction: Primorske, Stepnohirsk, Lukyanivske. The first sector that requires a separate discussion is the area around Primorske, Stepnohirsk, and Lukyanivske. The information landscape here, as is often the case, is a collision of two opposing narratives. Pro-Russian sources are reporting confident control over Stepnohirsk and even an expansion of the Russian army's presence zone to the north of the settlement. In parallel, the pro-Ukrainian side claims that all of Primorske and the majority of Stepnohirsk are under AFU, Armed Forces of Ukraine, control, and that Ukrainian forces are already striking Kamenska and conducting assault operations in that direction. If any of you are expecting me to tell you which side is right, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. Neither version is confirmed by objective video evidence. Both narratives contain an element of exaggeration, typical of the information war that accompanies combat operations. We update the map only after receiving verified information. So for this sector, no changes for now. Separately, on Lukyanivska, the picture here is slightly clearer. Footage with confirmed coordinates was received the day before. The previous episode covered how Ukrainian forces had advanced approximately 1.5 kilometers south of Lukyanivske. However, AFU positions there were struck, and at the current moment, Lukyanivske remains under Ukrainian military control. At the same time, Russian forces were compelled to abandon a number of settlements in this area. Lukyanivske, Mykolaivka, Zaporizhzhia, and Novyakovlivka. This was already covered in the previous episode. A number of pro-Russian resources, however, continue to mark all these villages as being under Russian control, which contradicts verified data. Active fighting in the areas of Mykolaivka, Zaporizhzhia, and Novyakovlivka continues, but neither side holds stable positions here. These settlements are in the grey zone. Why are they marked in favor of the AFU? Because the most recent confirmed video material came from Ukrainian positions in this area. Additionally, information was received about AFU expanding their control zone in Novyakovlivka by approximately 900 meters. It is possible that Russian forces subsequently reclaimed these positions, but without confirming data, it would be incorrect to update the map. All information comes exclusively from open sources. Lyman and Sloviansk. Direction: Pyskunivka and the Siversky Donets crossing. And here, the most interesting development of the past 24 hours. And arguably the main story of today's episode. For the third day in a row, significant news is coming from the sector of Group West. Formally, this is the Lyman direction, but in practice it is more accurate to speak of the Sloviansk direction, since events are unfolding on the western bank of the Siversky Donets and directly affect the approaches to Sloviansk rather than to Lyman. Let's recap the timeline. First, Russian forces crossed the river, and established themselves in Prishib, then took Prishib itself and entered Tatianivka. That process has already been thoroughly analyzed. But literally within the last 24 hours, footage appeared that initially caught many analysts genuinely off guard. Video showing Russian flags, and not just anywhere, but in Piskunivka. This is a small village on the left bank of the Siversky Donets, in the immediate vicinity of Kryvyi Luki. The initial reaction was understandable. Another river crossing, another bridgehead. However, further analysis revealed that the situation turned out to be considerably more complex and more interesting. According to available information, AFU fighters from the 81st Brigade, who had been holding positions in Piskunivka, crossed over to the Russian side. Under this version of events, the flags in the footage were not held by Russian soldiers, but by the defected AFU fighters, the flags having been dropped to them by drones beforehand. The stated reason for the defection, according to available information, was a complete breakdown in supply. The unit hadn't been rotated, wounded soldiers hadn't been evacuated, ammunition and provisions hadn't arrived. Effectively, these men were left abandoned in their positions and faced an extremely simple choice. I'll be honest, I treat this version with caution. Independently verifying it is not possible. Personally, I find the alternative version more credible. Russian forces crossed the Siversky Donets at this location, just as they did in the Prishib area, established control over the settlement, raised flags, and the story about the 81st Brigade switching sides emerged as an element of the information war. This is a typical tool in such conflicts, presenting a military success through the lens of the enemy's moral collapse. Nevertheless, the fact remains, video material showing Russian flags in Piskunivka exists. Russian presence in one form or another is confirmed. However, an important caveat must be made here. Looking at the terrain, it becomes obvious. The village itself sits in a low-lying area. Holding it without controlling the surrounding heights is an extremely vulnerable position. Quite literally, like being in a shooting range where you're visible from all sides. According to available data, the dominant high ground on the flanks remains under AFU control. This means that regardless of precisely how Piskunivka came to be within the Russian presence zone, it is premature to speak of stable, solid control over the settlement. Until the issue of the heights is resolved, any conclusions will be imprecise. And yet, if Russian forces manage to build on this initial success and secure the adjacent high ground, the prospects are genuinely promising. From Piskunivka to the outskirts of Mykolaivka is approximately 4 kilometers. And Mykolaivka, as regular viewers of this channel will know well, is the gateway to Sloviansk. Dobropillia direction, the quarry, Novomykolaivka, Kucherivka Yar. From the Dobropillia direction, the past 24 hours brought both good and troubling news. Let's start with the positive. Russian forces managed to establish control over the quarry of PJSC Voneu Rud, a site to the east of Toretsk, beyond the city itself. This was not a straightforward position. AFU had set up several fortified strongpoints there well in advance and held onto the quarry with considerable tenacity. The Russian army required substantial time and effort to dislodge the defenders. Nevertheless, the task is done. The quarry has passed under Russian control, and advancement toward Novomykolaivka is now possible. In parallel, the encirclement of Kucherivka Yar from the eastern flank continues. Movement is proceeding through the forest shelter belts. Approximately 800 meters remain to the outskirts of the village. Given the current dynamics, a second entry into Kucherivka Yar, the first, recall, occurred back in August of last year, could happen in the foreseeable future. Now for the bad news. The AFU launched 2 counter-assault strikes against Novyi Donbass and against Belitske. In both cases, Ukrainian forces managed to partially recover lost positions. In Novyi Donbass, AFU recaptured the northern part of the settlement. Russian army's full control over the village has been disrupted, and fighting continues. In Belitska, the situation is more complicated. Ukrainian forces reclaimed the northern and central parts of the city, and pressure continues from the southern direction as well. A scenario of prolonged back and forth is taking shape, with regular shifts in control, much like what played out in Rodinsky for a long time. And as long as the Russian army does not take control of the slag heap that dominates the city, the situation will remain this unstable. The slag heap is the key to Belitska. That much is obvious. Direction, urban fighting and approaches. There isn't much new from the Kupiansk direction, but the picture is fairly characteristic. Fighting in Kupiansk itself continues, and the city is de facto divided. Russian forces control the northern part, AFU hold the southern part, and the center remains a gray zone. The line of contact runs through residential districts. The conditions are extremely difficult. Active fighting is recorded in the Kucherivka area. Russian forces are pressing from two directions, from Sinkivka and from Petropavlivka. On the latter, a separate note. A number of pro-Ukrainian sources mark Petropavlivka as being under AFU control, but this interpretation does not correspond to the actual situation on the ground. Video material from the Russian side confirming control over the settlement has already been received. Fighting is also ongoing in the areas of Kupiansk-Vuzlovyi and Kovsharivka. No confirmed advances are recorded at the time of filming. Sumy direction, zone expansion and AFU counterstrikes. The picture from the Sumy direction was mixed. On the one hand, Russian forces continue to expand their presence zone in the areas of Novodmitrivka, Taratutin and Ryasne. No confirmed advances are recorded at this time. However, the previous episode featured footage from two separate points in this area, confirming Russian army expansion of the control zone by up to 4 kilometers. On the other hand, AFU counterstrikes against Novyi Donbass and Belitske, which were already covered above. The front on this sector remains dynamic. International context, JDAM, drones, Iran, and NATO. Now to the international agenda, and today it is particularly packed. The US and Ukraine. The United States State Department approved the potential transfer to Ukraine of more than 1,500 JDAM extended-range guided bombs. The total value of the deal is $373 million. The official departmental statement reads that the sale will support the foreign policy and national security objectives of the United States and will not alter the military balance in the region. This is standard diplomatic boilerplate that accompanies any major arms transaction, the EU and drones. The European Commission announced the creation of an EU-Ukraine drone alliance. The alliance will support the development of advanced unmanned aerial vehicle technologies. Launch is planned for the coming months, with applications accepted until May 25, 2026. A noteworthy piece of context. The Russian Ministry of Defense had previously published the addresses of European branches of Ukrainian enterprises producing drones for strikes on Russian territory. Iran and the UAE. Iran struck the United Arab Emirates with drones and missiles. The UAE air defense system engaged. The UAE Ministry of Defense urged the population to remain in safe locations and not approach debris from intercepted targets. Following the Iranian strike, the UAE threatened a response. The situation in the Persian Gulf continues to escalate. Iran's nuclear program. According to US intelligence assessments cited by Reuters, the time Iran requires to produce a nuclear weapon has remained virtually unchanged following the airstrikes by the US and Israel. Still approximately 9 to 12 months. Iran has preserved critical nuclear materials, roughly 440 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%, with the location of some of this stockpile unknown. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, this quantity could be sufficient to produce up to 10 nuclear devices upon further enrichment. The data is alarming, and it raises serious questions about the effectiveness of the strikes that have already taken place. The Pentagon and the Strait of Hormuz. Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth once again made hardline statements. According to him, Iran is attempting to subjugate the entire world, and the ceasefire is not final. Hegseth stated that the US has the capability to unblock the Strait of Hormuz without entering Iranian airspace or territorial waters. He stressed that Washington is not seeking escalation, but considers Iran an aggressor unlawfully restricting navigation on an international waterway. The blockade of the strait and Operation Project Freedom remain in place but are characterized as temporary measures. In the event of attacks on commercial vessels, the Pentagon has promised overwhelming firepower. The US, Germany, and Tomahawks. According to Politico, the United States is not only reducing its troop presence in Germany, but is effectively walking away from the transfer of Tomahawk cruise missiles that Biden promised Berlin back in 2024. The unit designated to deploy these missiles in Europe is being withdrawn, and with it, the plan itself is dead. A senior NATO diplomat acknowledged the obvious. In terms of long-range strike capabilities, Europe still faces a critical capability gap, and there is no quick fix available. Trump on the war. In an interview with Salem News Channel, President Trump stated that Ukraine continues to lose territory and is capable of conducting combat operations solely due to Western arms supplies. Speaking of Ukrainian forces, he noted that they have the ability to fight, but only because they receive weapons from allies. Trump also called Zalinski cunning and recalled their meeting at the White House in early 2025, characterizing the Ukrainian president's behavior as aggressive. The assistance provided to Kyiv under the Biden administration, totaling $350 billion in weapons transfers, Trump described as laughable. That wraps up today's review. As always, verified data only, open sources only. The situation on the front remains dynamic, and tomorrow we'll be back with an updated picture. If the episode was useful, hit the like button, leave a comment, and don't forget the bell. See you next time, friends.